My name is Ilara. And I swore I'd never come back here, not after what happened. Not after what I lost. But grief doesn't ask for permission. It pulls you by the collar, drags you by the throat, and drops you at the feet of the memories you tried hardest to bury. I didn't come for the horse. I didn't come for anything, really. I just needed to disappear, and what better place than a forgotten farm tucked into the ribs of a sleeping valley where even time seems to move slower, sadder. I hadn't been here in almost 12 years, the paint on the house had blistered away in the sun, and the shutters hung like tired eyelids. The garden was wild, reclaiming everything, weeds through the porch steps, moss crawling over the swing where I used to sit with Grandpa while he told stories about wild things and quiet people. And there, just beyond the old apple tree, was the pasture, still fenced in, still empty, or so I thought until I saw him. He stood at the far edge of the field, so still I thought he might have been carved from the fog. A stallion. Large, black, and wrong, not wrong in form, but in feeling. He didn't belong to this land. Not that I recognized. Not that I remembered. Grandpa never had a horse like that. His horses were steady geldings, old and kind-eyed. This one? He looked like wind with a heartbeat, and he was watching me. I froze. On the path to it was early morning. Mist clung to the dew-soaked grass like ghosts, and a raven barked once from a pine. I could feel my heart moving too fast, not from fear, not yet. But from something older than fear. Something deeper. I took a step back, the horse didn't move. I took another, and then turned toward the house. It was probably nothing, I told myself. Some neighbor's horse. A drifter that got past the fence. I didn't care. I wasn't here for horses. I was here to forget. To hide. To stay quiet until the world stopped asking me to feel anything, and yet, I looked back, and he was still watching me. The inside of the house smelled like old pages and dried flowers. I left my suitcase by the front door and wandered through each room with a slow ache in my chest. Dust had covered the kitchen counters. Cobwebs drew silver lines across the pantry door. But everything was intact. Grandpa's coat still hung by the door. His boots, lined and worn, still rested beneath the bench. I found the old journal in the drawer of his desk. It was wrapped in twine. Untouched. I shouldn't have opened it, not then. Not that morning. But my fingers moved before I could think. Before I could stop myself. There's something about him. Not wild. Not tame. Just waiting. Watching. I don't know why he came. But I think he's here for her. There was no name. No context. Just that passage. One page. I slammed it shut. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the wind in the trees, and the groan of the old barn door swinging just barely open and closed. I imagined hooves on gravel. Breath through nostrils. A snort just outside the window, and when I looked out, there he was, standing by the gate, alone. Silent. Staring straight at me. I whispered, "You shouldn't be here." He didn't move. I woke early, or maybe I never really slept, and pulled on Grandpa's old barn coat, still faintly scented with wood smoke and peppermint. I made coffee. Burned the toast. Let the silence settle into my bones like a second skin, and then I went back outside. The morning was colder than before. A curtain of fog lay low across the pasture like it had fallen asleep on the earth. I walked the edge of the fence slowly, as if testing something, maybe myself. The horse was gone. Good, I told myself. Good. He doesn't belong here. But when I reached the far corner of the field, the gate was open, not broken. Not busted. Just open, like someone had unlatched it on purpose. My pulse kicked hard. Nope, I whispered. No. This isn't my problem. I pushed the gate closed, set the latch back in place, and turned to walk away, but a sound stopped me. A sound so small, so soft, I thought I imagined it. A single hoof step. Behind me. I turned around, and there he was, closer now. On my side of the fence. No halter. No brand. No rope. Nothing but wind and muscle and darkness wrapped in skin. I stared at him. He stared at me, my fingers curled into fists. I don't do horses anymore, I said aloud, as if declaring it made it true. I'm not that girl anymore. His ears flicked forward. He took one step closer. I stepped back. Don't. He stopped. We stood like that for a long time, two broken things, measuring the distance between us with silence. I said no, I whispered. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't flinch, and something in me shook loose. Back inside the house, I slammed the door and locked it. Not that it mattered. He wasn't trying to break in. He wasn't even trying to chase me. But there was something about his stillness, the way he looked at me like he already knew who I was, like he'd seen me at my worst and wasn't afraid, and it made me angry, because no one had looked at me like that in years, not since I lost her. I opened Grandpa's journal again that afternoon. Read the next page. She'll push him away. She has to. That's how we survive. But he won't leave. He never does. There was a dried flower pressed between the pages, lavender. The scent tugged at something buried so deep in my chest I almost forgot how to breathe. That night, I dreamed of hoofs pounding through fog. Of a figure standing in the rain. Of a girl with shaking hands reaching towards something she didn't believe she deserved, and when I woke, the fog had thickened. I made tea with shaking hands and opened the front door, and there he was again, closer than before, standing just beneath the porch. His breath curling like smoke, waiting. I should have slammed the door, I should have yelled or waved my arms or thrown something. I should have screamed the word I used to live by. No, but all I did was stare and whisper, why? He blinked slowly. Tipped his head, and then, one step. One quiet, deliberate step. I didn't move, I didn't run, I just watched, and something inside me whispered back, because you're not afraid of him. You're afraid of what he sees. I didn't sleep again, not really. Not the kind of sleep that rests the bones. I lay beneath the patchwork quilt Grandma made, staring at the cracks in the ceiling as shadows shifted with the moonlight. I kept hearing that sound, hooves brushing against gravel, breath like a warm wind in winter. He hadn't moved. The stallion stayed beneath the porch all night, just barely visible through the lace curtain. Like a sentinel. Like a ghost. I hated how still he made me feel. In the morning, I dressed faster than I meant to. Boots, coat, hat. No makeup, no mirror. I didn't want to look at myself, not yet. Not with my reflection still stitched together from grief and memory. Outside, the fog had cleared, but the chill remained. He was still there, not beneath the porch anymore, but standing at the edge of the apple tree, exactly where I used to play when I was a child. The old tire swing dangled from one brittle limb, swaying ever so slightly. His eyes found mine the moment I stepped onto the porch. I said nothing. He said less. I made a show of ignoring him, checking the water pump, gathering broken branches from the path, brushing leaves off the steps with a wide old broom. But every few seconds, I looked up, and he was always watching. I hated how calm he looked, how sure that he didn't act like a wild animal. Didn't flinch at the rake I dropped or the loud creak of the cellar door. He just stood there, like he already knew I wouldn't do anything, and maybe I wouldn't, but I had to try. I grabbed an old shovel, slammed it down hard against the gravel path. Go on. Get out of here. He didn't even blink. I shouted louder this time. I said go. Nothing, just breath. Just stillness. Just those black eyes, steady and deep and maddeningly quiet. I threw the shovel down and stormed inside. Damn white chest felt too small for my lungs. My ribs tight with something I didn't want to name. By afternoon, I was pacing. I told myself I didn't care. Let him stay, let him haunt the yard like some ancient myth. I didn't come here to tame anything. I didn't come here to fix or be fixed. I came here to vanish. And yet, I opened Grandpa's journal again. I found another entry. Short. Blunt. You can't run from what sees you. You can only learn to stand still. I slammed it shut again. I didn't go outside the rest of the day. It didn't even look through the windows, but that didn't stop the sound. Hooves, steps, a soft exhale. Just beyond the door I sat by the fireplace, unmoving. Not from fear, but from knowing. The kind of knowing that presses into your skin and makes your heart hold its breath. That night, it rained hard, the roof moaned with the weight of water, and wind pressed against the shutters like desperate fingers trying to come in. I stood At the window for a long time, palms flat on the cool glass, and there he was, still outside, drenched, motionless. I flung the door open. "What are you doing? You'll freeze." He didn't move. "You can't stay here. You're not mine." He blinked once. Rain traced the curve of his jaw. He looked like a dream carved from storm and silence. "I told you to stay away." Nothing, only thunder, only breath, only the sound of my voice breaking in the dark. The next morning, I found the barn key. I hadn't planned to look for it. But when my fingers brushed against the hook beneath the pantry shelf, I knew what it was without turning on the light. I held it in my palm a long time. The barn had been locked. Since Grandpa died, no one had gone in. Not even the man who mowed the pasture once a year. Still, I crossed the field with the key in my coat pocket, every step a question I couldn't ask out loud. And of course, he followed. I didn't hear him approach, but when I turned to unlatch the barn door, he was right behind me, too close. I turned fast. "No," he stilled, "I mean it. I don't want this." He didn't retreat, it didn't come closer either, just watched me with eyes that seemed to soften as the wind stirred between us. "I'm not who I was," I whispered. That he blinked. "I used to love horses. I used to live out here. Before everything fell apart. Before I lost her. Before I forgot how to breathe without flinching." My voice trembled. "I hated that." "She's gone," I said. "And I'm not coming back to who I was. So please, just go." I turned the key, the lock clicked open, the smell hit me first, hay, leather, dampness, time. The barn hadn't changed, dust clung to the rafters like forgotten memories. A broken halter hung from a peg on the wall. I stepped inside slowly. Each footfall stirring up fragments of my old life, and behind me, the horse did not follow. That he stayed in the doorway, silent, patient, like he was waiting for permission I couldn't give. Later, I found an old Polaroid taped to the wall of Grandpa's tack room. It was me. Maybe 12 years old. Covered in mud and grinning beside a chestnut mare with one white sock. Her name was Fake. She was the one I lost, not to death, but to fear. To panic. To the moment I froze while she needed me to move. That no one blamed me, but I did. For years, I carried that moment like a blade between my ribs. I never rode again. That night, I didn't dream, but I did leave the barn door slightly ajar, not an invitation. Just a choice. A sliver of space. At sunrise, I found hoofprints. Just inside the threshold, only two. As if he'd stepped in. And then stepped back out. I stood there for minutes. No breath, no thought, just the echo of everything I'd been running from curling around my ankles like fog. He hadn't forced his way in, that he'd waited, and that, more than anything, shook something loose in me. I found him by the apple tree again, nibbling at the bark. "Hey," I said, softer this time. He lifted his head. I crossed the grass slowly. No sudden moves. My hand stayed loose by my sides. "I told you to stay away," I said. He didn't blink. I yelled. I meant it. I wasn't ready. He stepped forward, just once. One step. I didn't flinch this time. I stood still, and that was the first time I saw it, not just the power, the beauty, the quiet intensity, but the grief that I in him, like he, too, had lost something, like he wasn't here to be healed, but to mourn beside someone who understood. I didn't touch him, not yet, but I didn't turn away either. We stood there until the sun cleared the hill and the morning warmed just enough to melt the last threads of frost. One breath. One broken girl. One strange stallion, and something between us neither of us had words for. Not yet, but I was starting to wonder if he'd brought the words with him, and was just waiting for me to listen. There's a moment before you say yes to something that scares you, not the loud kind of fear, not the screaming kind, but the kind that breathes quietly beneath your ribs, the moment when your body still wants to run, but your heart, it leans forward. The morning was too still. No wind. No birdsong. No footsteps on gravel, just the sound of the old clock ticking in the hallway, and my own breath rising too fast, too shallow, like I'd forgotten how to be still without effort. I didn't look out the window, not yet, because I knew he'd be there. I drank my tea cold, held the mug too tightly, avoided the journal on the table like it might bite. I kept thinking about the hoofprints in the barn. Just two. One step in. One step out. As if he were telling me he could enter, but wouldn't. Not unless I asked, and that scared me more than anything, because the world I came from never asked. It took that it broke, and it walked away. I eventually walked to the porch, not to see him. Not because I wanted to. That's what I told myself, but I opened the door anyway, and there he was, not under the apple tree. Not by the barn. Closer, so much closer, just at the base of the porch steps now, still. Waiting, like he knew this was the day. I stepped outside, slow. Deliberate, the boards creaked beneath my boots, and I saw his ears twitch, not back, not wary. Just listening. His eyes met mine, and I swear he saw me, not just the outside. Not just the bones and scars and sorrow. He saw the girl I buried beneath all that silence. The girl who used to believe horses could hear your secrets through your skin. I stood there a long time, then I whispered the only thing I had left, no. A single word, not screamed. Not defiant. Just broken. Barely audible, a whisper of protection I didn't even believe in anymore, but he heard it, and he stepped forward. Point one step, point one deliberate, careful, quiet step, and I didn't move. I didn't run, I didn't scream, because I wasn't sure who I was saying no to anymore, him, or myself. The sun had only just begun to burn off the mist. It caught on his back like silver, like armor, and I realized something in that moment. I wasn't afraid of the horse, I was afraid of what he made me feel, afraid of the way my heart lifted toward him like a forgotten instinct. Afraid of what it meant to be seen, not pitied, not questioned, just seen, and when he stepped again, a second step, softer than the first, I felt it. A shift, like gravity had changed direction, like I had been falling for years and only now noticed the ground rising to meet me. He stopped just an arm's length away, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, the quiet heat of life radiating from muscle and breath and presence, but still. He didn't touch me, didn't even reach. He waited, and that ruined me more than anything, because the people I loved never waited. They pulled, they pushed, they left. I sat on the porch step, wide legs folded beneath me, my hands tucked between my knees to keep from reaching toward him. I watched him. He watched back, and time stretched. A bird sang. A leaf fell. Somewhere, a windmill creaked, and I spoke again. I lost her, I said, so quietly the wind almost took it. She was mine. My horse. Faye. His ears shifted forward. She trusted me. And I froze. I didn't hold the line. I didn't move. And she slipped. The memory clawed up through my chest, raw and sharp. She broke her leg. They said it wasn't my fault. But it was. I was the rider. I was the one she looked to. And I failed. A tear slid down my cheek, and I didn't brush it away. I haven't touched a horse since. Silence, then, movement, not loud, not sudden, just a single shift of weight, and then, one more step, and his muzzle was only inches from my knee. He could have pressed forward. Could have nosed at my arm or my hair or my face, but he didn't. He stopped there, breathing quietly, waiting, like a prayer held between heartbeats. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I let the ache come without fighting it, the grief. The shame. The guilt that wrapped itself around my memories like barbed wire, and when I opened my eyes again, he was still there, unmoved, unjudging, just present. I reached out, not to touch him, just to see if I could. My hand trembled as I lifted it, fingers half curled. A slow, careful offering of trust one didn't know I still possessed, and then, he stepped forward again. Point one step, and his nose brushed gently against my wrist. A whisper of warmth. A breath against skin, and I exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for years. It wasn't a dramatic moment, and no lightning. No music. Just quiet, real. A connection built from silence and sorrow, and the simple miracle of not walking away. I didn't pull back. He didn't press forward. We just stayed for minutes. Maybe more. A girl and a stallion. Point two ghosts, choosing not to haunt anymore. Eventually, he stepped back, just one pace, gave me space again, like he knew I needed it, like he'd made his point and would wait for me to make mine. I let my hand fall back into my lapm. My pulse was steady now, slower, softer, and in that stillness, something in me began to shift, not finished, not healed, but no longer stuck. Later that evening, I found another note in Grandpa's journal. I hadn't meant to open it, but the leather cover called to my fingers like the spine of a story that finally knew its ending. She'll say no, of course she will. But sometimes, no is just the last breath before a whisper of a maybe. And he knows how to wait. That night, I didn't cry, not because I was strong, but because I didn't need to anymore. The tears had already spoken, and the horse had already listened. The next morning, he was gone from the porch, gone from the field, not a sound. Not a hoof print, and for a moment, fear tightened in my throat like a noose, but when I looked toward the barn, the door was open, just a crack, just enough, and inside, I saw the silhouette of something waiting in the light, not pushing, not pulling, just standing still, and something inside me, something I thought was dead, stood up too. The barn door was open, just a crack, wide enough to see his silhouette framed by dust and golden morning light. But he stood inside like he belonged there. Like he always had. No sound. No movement. Just breath. Quiet. Warm. Waiting, and me? I stood outside, 1 foot hovering just above the threshold, frozen by the weight of 100 memories. I wasn't ready, not for this, not to go back inside with him, not to face what the barn still remembered, the last time I stood in this doorway. Faye had been alive, and then she wasn't. She had slipped in a storm, a single misstep on wet clay, and her leg shattered like porcelain. I'd frozen. I didn't call for help. I didn't even move up. By the time I reacted, it was too late. She had looked at me, not in pain, not in panic, but in trust, and I'd broken it. I gripped the old doorframe, the wood soft with age, beneath my palm. He still didn't move. I whispered, "Why are you here?" But he only turned his head slightly, not answering, not leaving, just listening, like he knew the question wasn't for him. I stepped back, closed the door gently, not out of rejection, but out of self-preservation, though I couldn't do it. Not yet. I wasn't strong enough, and still. He didn't follow. He waited. I didn't see him for the rest of the day. The silence sat wrong on my skin, like wearing someone else's coat. Too big. Too foreign. Too empty. I walked the perimeter of the property 3 times, past the fence. Past the creek. Past the apple tree that no longer bloomed. Then no hoofprints, no sign, just wind and sun and a gnawing ache in my ribs I didn't know how to name. He was gone. I didn't cry, not yet, but something inside me started to break apart, quietly, like dry leaves in an autumn wind. That night, the storm returned, louder than before, the kind of storm that shakes the walls and whispers to every old memory you've ever tried to bury. I couldn't sleep. The rain came hard, pounding on the roof like a warning. Thunder crawled across the valley in long, deep growls, and something inside me knew he was out there, alone, and I had closed the door on him. I threw on Grandpa's coat, grabbed the flashlight, and no umbrella. No boots. No plan, just instinct, just guilt. I reached the barn and pushed open the door, already soaked to the bone. "Hello?" I called, breathless. "Are you in here?" No answer, only the creak of rafters and the roar of rain on the tin roof. I searched every stall. Every shadow, nothing. He was gone. I stood in the center of the barn, trembling, flashlight beam dancing across old tools, dusty feed sacks, forgotten bridles, and then, a sound low to muffled pained it came from behind the barn. I ran. He was lying down, collapsed just beyond the rear slope of the hill, half in mud, half on stone, his flank rising fast, too fast. A shallow gash marked his shoulder. Nothing deep, but bleeding steadily. His hind leg trembled beneath him, and I knew he couldn't stand. "Hey," I breathed, falling to my knees beside him. He didn't flinch. Didn't spook. His eyes found mine, not in fear, but in resignation, like he'd expected this, like he had waited for me to come. "Oh God. I'm so sorry." I pressed my hand gently to his side, unsure if I was trying to calm him, or myself. Lightning cracked through the sky above us. He didn't even blink. I ran back to the barn, pulled an old blanket from the loft, found iodine, bandages, threadbare towels. I worked in the rain and no gloves. No guide, just my hands and wide breath, and his silent, unflinching trust. I spoke to him while I cleaned the wound. I wasn't ready. He blinked slowly. "I still don't think I am." The rain softened into a hush, but you waited anyway. It took half an hour to stop the bleeding, another 20 minutes to coax him onto his feet. He rose slowly, carefully, and leaned into me, not heavily, not painfully, but just enough that I asked if to say you did enough. "I knew you would." We walked back to the barn together, step by step. No halter, no rope, just 2 beings, weathered, worn, and not quite whole, moving toward shelter. I dried him with towels, laid fresh hay in the corner stall, sat beside him for hours as the storm finally passed. He never closed his eyes, neither did I. The next morning, the sun came through the barn window in long Golden slants. He was standing, eating slowly. Calmly, I stepped into the stall without hesitation this time. He didn't wait for permission. He pressed his forehead against my shoulder, just briefly, and I didn't pull away. I found another page in Grandpa's journal later that day. Point one I hadn't seen before. When she lets him lean on her, even just once, she'll remember what it felt like to be strong. Not loud. Not perfect. Just present. I sat on the porch that evening with a cup of warm tea and watched him graze in the pasture. The wound was clean, the bleeding had stopped, and the way he moved told me he'd recover, but that wasn't the part that broke me. It was the way he turned his head toward me every few minutes, just to make sure I was still there. I whispered across the grass, "I still don't know what you want from me." And though I knew he couldn't answer, I felt something stir inside me anyway. An echo, the unknowing, like maybe the question wasn't, "What do you want from me?" at all, maybe it was, "What do I still want to give?" And for the first time in so many years, I wasn't afraid of the answer. There's a silence that comes after the storm, not the absence of sound, but the presence of peace. A stillness that doesn't ask for anything. It just is. That morning, I woke without fear, not because everything was okay, it wasn't, but because, for the first time, I didn't feel alone inside my skin. I walked barefoot through the kitchen, my hair still tangled from sleep. Sunlight poured through the windows like gold, and the scent of earth and damp wood drifted in through the open screen door. Outside, he waited, not at the gate, not under the apple tree, but at the porch right where I'd left him, as if he knew I was ready. Even before I did, I stepped outside slowly. He lifted his head. His shoulder, still wrapped in clean linen from the night before, looked better. The bleeding had stopped. The swelling had gone down. But it wasn't his body I saw when I looked at him. It was his faith, his quiet, unshakable patience that he never forced his way in. He had waited for me to open the door, and now, I finally had. I reached for the halter hanging from the porch rail, an old one, cracked leather. Once phased. He watched. I stepped down slowly and stopped just in front of him. "You don't need this," I said quietly, lowering the halter. "Do you?" He didn't move. Didn't need to. We understood each other now, not with words. Not with control, with trust. I walked to the barn. He followed. No hesitation. No distance. Just shadow and sunlight between us. I led him into the open paddock behind the hill. It was overgrown, untouched for years, but the earth remembered, and so did I. There was no saddle. No bit. No bridle. Just bare hands, bare back, bare soul. I stepped onto the old mounting log and looked at him, one hand gently brushing his withers. "I haven't done this in years," I whispered. He turned his head slightly. Waited. I climbed on, and not quickly. Not gracefully, but willingly, and he stood still, solid, strong, like he knew what this meant, not just for me, but for the girl I used to be. We moved slowly at first, point one step, then another. The rhythm came back like a memory long buried beneath shame, the sway of his movement, the softness of the earth, the breath between us. I closed my eyes, let the wind kiss my face. Let the sun warm the top of my shoulders. Let my body remember that we didn't go far, just down the slope, past the old fence line, through a narrow corridor of birches and up toward the ridge where the land opened like a deep breath. I had been here before, with Faye, before it all fell apart, before the day that changed everything, and now here I was again, not to rewrite the past, but to reclaim what was left of it. We stopped at the top of the ridge. The valley stretched below us, shimmering with new light. Mountains rose in the distance, blue and soft like watercolor, and I cried, not the bitter kind. Not the silent, shamed kind, but the kind of crying that comes when a wound finally lets go of its grip on your soul. I pressed my hand against his neck. "Thank you," I whispered. He didn't move, but I felt it, the warmth beneath my palm, the slow rhythm of his breath, the quiet heartbeat steady beneath his skin, and I knew that we were whole again, not perfect, not finished, but no longer broken. The ride back was slower, the silence deeper, the connection stronger. As we entered the pasture, I saw something on the porch. A figure, not real, not possible, but there just for a moment. Grandpa, sitting in his old chair, arms folded, a knowing smile on his face, and then, gone. Only a shadow. Only memory, but enough. That evening, as the light faded, I wrote in the back of Grandpa's journal. The pages were worn, most already filled with his looping script, but I found a blank one, near the end, and I wrote, "He didn't fix me. He didn't need to. He stood still long enough for me to remember that I could move again. And when I did, he walked beside me. That night, I left the barn door wide open, no locks, no latches, just trust. I dreamed of hooves in soft grass, of laughter by the apple tree, of a girl and a horse and a future not yet written. But the next morning, he was gone, no sound, no hoofprints, just absence, and for a moment, I panicked. The silence felt wrong again. Empty. Had I waited too long? Had I made him wait too long? But then, I found something in the barn, not him and not his breath or his body, but his presence. A single white feather lying in the middle of the stall where he had slept, nothing more, just that. Did I as if to say, "You're ready now." I stood there for a long time, holding the feather in both hands, letting the ache swell, then eased that he had come when I needed him most, stayed when I said it go. Stepped closer every time I said no, and now, he had given me what I hadn't dared hope for. A closure, not with words, with grace. People won't believe this story, they'll say it was just a horse, a lost stallion that wandered in and wandered out. But I know better. He wasn't lost. He came here on purpose, not to be found, but to remind me that I still could be. Weeks passed, then months, spring turned to summer, and I stayed, planted new flowers by the fence, mended the garden gate, painted the shutters sky blue, laughed with the wind, sometimes cried with it, too, but I didn't run, because this place, these hills, these memories, they were part of me now, and I had made peace with that point. One morning, just after the leaves began to turn, I woke to a sound I hadn't heard in months, hoofs, and not galloping and not pacing, just walking, calm and measured. I stepped onto the porch, heart pounding, and there he was, not in the field, not at the barn, but at the base of the steps, exactly where I'd found him the first time. He looked older, stronger, and yet unchanged. As if no time had passed at all. As if he had always been here, in the quiet, in the wind, in the spaces between every heartbeat. I smiled through the tears. "Welcome home," I whispered. He stepped forward. One step, and this time, I met him halfway.